In this video, we're going to write JavaScript code to submit the form with the user inputs. So first of all, we're going to access the form and then use the submit method. And then after that, we're going to prevent the default submission of the form. And then we're going to get all the user inputs, store them in a variable. And then after that, we're going to use the Google Maps geocoder in order for us to get the coordinates of the departure and destination. We'll get those coordinates, add them to the variable where we stored all the user inputs, and then if everything is okay, we're going to send an AJAX call with all that data. So the call is going to go to the add trips.php file. All right, so let's start. So we're going to write code to be executed when we click on create trip button. Okay, so let's select the form using its ID. And then use the submit method. So this method is going to take as a parameter a function. So this function is going to have one parameter, an event object. All right, so we're going to need that object later on to prevent the default processing. Okay, so first of all, let's start by that. So we're going to prevent the default processing by using the event object and then a method called prevent default. We've done this many times now, so you must be familiar with this. Okay. All right. So now we are ready to retrieve the user inputs using the serialize array function. So you're going to select the form. Again, you can use the keyword this because we are already inside the form, and use the serialize array function. So now you've got all the inputs, okay, or the values that the user has inputs. So let's store this inside a variable I'm going to call data. So I'm going to define this variable right before, as we're going to be using it later on for other forms. Okay, so let's just check this and make sure that everything works. We're going to print this in the console. So if we try something, okay, so let's not look at that for now. That's related to Google Maps. Okay, that's something in the link. So here is the array that we printed. So you can see the user inputs there. Okay, and you can see the pairs of names and values. All right, so everything works so far. So what we're going to do now, we need to add to those inputs something else, which is the coordinates of the departure and destination. Okay, so if you remember, we need those to fill these fields in the table. Okay, so to get those, we're going to start with the departure coordinates. So to make our code tidy, we're going to define a function which will take care of this. So we're going to call this function get departure coordinates. Okay. So later on, we're going to need to use another function with the edit form. Okay. It's going to be more or less similar to this one. So just to differentiate between the two functions, I'm going to call this one add trip, get add trip departure coordinates. And then when we come to the other one, we're going to call it get edit trip departure coordinates. Okay. So let's define this function straight after. So it's not going to take any parameters. Okay, so to get the coordinates of the departure, we're going to need something called a geocoder. So the geocoder is going to be an object that we're going to use, or we're going to create using a Google Maps constructor called geocoder. So what I'm going to do, right at the top of the file, I'm going to create something called a geocoder. So it's an object, okay, and we're gonna use it, well, we're gonna need it to use the geocode feature of Google Maps. This feature will allow us to get coordinates of a certain location. So let's define this variable. So we're gonna call it geocoder, okay, and we're gonna use a constructor for this. So we're gonna use the keyword new, and then the constructor is inside Google Maps. It's called geocoder. Okay, so using that object, we can send requests, okay, with a certain location or address, and then we're going to get a result, and then inside the result, we can guess the coordinates of that address. So let's go ahead and use this geocoder. So let's send the request. So we're going to use the object geocoder, and then we're going to use a method called geocode. Okay, so this method is going to take options. So we need only one option here, which we'll place inside curly brackets. So this option is going to be the address. So in our case, we want this element here. So we can just select this input and get the value of that input. All right. So you can use jQuery for this, or JavaScript straight away using the getElementsById function. So the ID of that field is departure. And then to get the value, it's value like this. Okay, if you use jQuery, you can just select the element, okay, using its ID, and then you use the val method. All right, so now we've got the options. So right after the options, we need a function. Just make things tidy. Okay, so the function is going to take a couple of parameters. So we're going to have the results, okay, that's what we're going to get in return, and the status of the request. So the status is going to tell us if the request is okay or not. Okay, so first of all, we're going to check if the status is okay. Okay, if the status is fine, then we're going to get the coordinates of our address. Otherwise, we will decide what to do. Okay, so to check if the request is fine, we're going to check the value of the status. So we're going to check if the value of the status is okay, and the value okay here needs to be set using google.maps.geocoderstatus.okay. So this is what an OK status is. Okay, so if that's the case, we're going to get the coordinates. All right, so for now, we're just going to print the results array in the console just to see what it looks like. So let's save and refresh and try something. Okay, so we've got an array, and inside the array, you've got an object. All right. So we can see elements inside. So if we look at the geometry, okay, and then the location. So inside the location, you can see that we've got a method latitude. So you can't see the value of the latitude here, but we're going to need to use the method latitude to get the latitude, and the same thing applies for the longitude. Okay, so basically to get the latitude and longitude, we're going to go to our results array, go to the first element of the array, which is an object. Okay, you've got only one element anyway, and then we're going to need to go to the location and then use these methods latitude and longitude. Okay, so I'm going to use a variable for the longitude. I'm going to call it departure longitude. So I'm going to define it right after data. And we're going to set that to the longitude, which is what is going to be returned by the method longitude. So to use that method, we're going to use the results array. Then we're going to go to the element of index 0. You've got only one element anyway. And then we're going to go to geometry. And then we're going to go to location. And then we're going to use the longitude method. Okay. And the same thing applies for the latitude. The only thing that's going to change is that we're going to use the latitude method. Okay, and then once we do this, we're going to add these two elements to the data variable where we stored all the inputs of our user. But before we do that, let's just alert these elements and just make sure that everything works. Okay, so you can see the departure longitude, okay, of Bedford, and the departure latitude of Bedford. Okay, so you can check that online, just make sure that you're getting everything fine. And we can see that we've got the right stuff there, 52 for the longitude and 52 for the latitude, and minus 0.4 for the longitude. Okay. All right, so let's delete this for now. So to add these to the data variable or the data array, we're going to use the push method. Okay. So you're going to need to add a pair of a name and value for each of these. So you're going to use curly brackets, and then we're going to have a name and a value. So the first one is going to have a name departure longitude, I'm going to call it. So this is the name that we're going to be using in the PHP file. So you're going to refer to this one as departure longitude. So the value is going to be that one. And regarding the other one is going to be departure latitude, and the value is departure latitude. All right. All right, now let's print the data variable in the console and see what we get. Okay, so if you look at the final elements inside our array, we've got a couple of objects there, and we can see the departure longitude and the departure latitude. Okay, so now we're going to decide here what we're going to do. Okay, so if the status is okay, now we've added the departure longitude and latitude to the data variable. So now what happens to the rest? So we're going to need to look now as the departure at the destination coordinates. Okay, so we can call another function here. Okay, and we're going to call it get attrib destination coordinates. Okay, if the status is not okay, we will still call the same function because we still want to get all the inputs, okay, and then send everything to the PHP file, and then once we get everything, then we can show any errors to show. Okay, so for example, if the status is not okay here, that means that something is wrong with the departure. But still, we will carry on and we'll move to the destination, and we get details or coordinates of our destination. And then once everything is okay, we will still submit all the values to the PHP file, and then we're going to show all the errors to our user. Okay, if we stop right there and show an error message, then we can still do that and just say to the user something is wrong with the departure and they will need to fix the departure only. Okay, but I'm going to follow the other way here. Okay, so now we will need to define this function. Okay, this function is going to be very similar to this one. So I'm just going to copy the code, and then I'm going to change it slightly. So we're going to call it get attrib destination coordinates. Okay, so the elements we're looking at here is the elements of ID destination. We'll still call the gcoder to get the coordinates, and instead of departure longitude, we're gonna call destination longitude. So you're gonna need to define those variables. Okay, I missed the other one here. So I missed the departure latitude. So you're gonna need the destination longitude and latitude. Okay, then we're going to change all departures to destination. Okay. Right, now let's just delete these two. Okay, and save. So let's just print the data variable. Okay, so at the end of the array, we can see the destination longitude and destination latitude. Okay, so the value there is not right. Okay, that's supposed to be destination latitude. Okay, so let's save and refresh again. Okay, so let's have a quick look at our objects at the end. So we can see the destination longitude and destination latitude. All right. Okay, so in the next video, we're going to submit the form using Ajax.